back with another episode of On the Record with Tiffany. Happy New Year to everyone in our listening range and in our viewing range. We're here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer and on the African American Network Television, where we have a local feel with a global reach. And today I have one of my favorite community activists and visionary, Shokare Nikori, known to his friends as Sho.
Good afternoon, Tiffany. Thank you so much for having me here. I was looking forward to it all weekend, quite honestly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited about Dream Week coming up next week. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about Dream Week and what it is for those who are living under a rock and don't know what Dream Week is?
Well, Dream Week is now it's become a 2-week celebration of tolerance, diversity, and equality. But more importantly, it's a summit that, we use to create an environment for civil and civic engagement. We can't get enough of people mixing in every single way, but not necessarily having to necessarily shift their positions. It's just enough to engage, get to know the other person, maybe even learn something from the other person. So this is our 10th year coming up, and we've had thousands of events. So if you haven't heard of Dream Week, you've missed quite a bit, but
Right.
Dream Week is for the future. And so it's a good time to participate. So what we do, Dreamvoice is the agency behind Dream Week. And Dreamvoice, basically we solicit throughout the year community organizations and individuals and appeal to them to host an event celebrating tolerance, diversity, and equality. So this is, we have 175 partners coming up this year. So this is really the largest community curated event of its kind in the nation. So it's not so much as Dreamvoice or Shokare Napodia creating this summit. It's really the community, literally the community actually hosting events. And then we promote it, and the events range from, the classic debates to panel discussions, speaker series, and then celebrations, fashion shows, and galas. Again, underlying all of this is obviously we're inspired by MLK, but we're inspired for 2 reasons. Number one, we believe that his approach, as with many others in the civil rights movement, was to, attempt to sit across the table and basically lay out your own opinions and attempt to probably sway the other party. But most importantly, because they were speaking, there was no need for violence, although that occurred as well, but it was actually the discussions that ended up mitigating all of that. And then the second reason, of course, is that we believe that there's a community, we all have community genius, there's a community genius, and we believe that there are individual geniuses in our community. What better way to get them exposed or revealed than to have a summit where there's no real fee or application, at least there's no certification necessarily to be part of it. And that's essentially what Dream Week is about.
I love that, because Dream Week and On the Record with Tiffany are basically in alignment in terms of mission.
Yes.
Because that's really why we started also, is because we believe people are more alike than they are different.
Definitely.
That we, and that very same mentality, those 2 reasons, working together, and the fact that exactly, so you so well stated, there are geniuses right in front of our eyes that we don't know about because they're busy working.
Yes.
And they're working within the scope of what their mission and purpose in life is.
Yes.
And so they, something like Dream Week, all of a sudden, when you bring in your speakers panel and your your speaker series, then you get to highlight, okay, well there's SACAM doing magnificent things in terms of
Yes.
archiving our history, accurately archiving our history. You've got all kinds of other organizations that are in the arts that are that have so many different aspects of that highlight so many different aspects of our community, and we never see all this conglomeration of different ideas were it not for something like Dream Week.
Yes. San Antonio is a huge city. And so, we kind of model ourselves using South by Southwest, which is global. And, but, they've had maybe 30 years or so of kind of refining that and making sure that they have a kind of a machine going on. And so we can be the kind of more cerebral South by Southwest. We can be, an organization that we can use our resources to welcome people around the world to visit San Antonio in early January and attempt to resolve conflict. And that could be the core vision of Dreamvoice going forward. But more importantly, I think we can actually, without necessarily trying to get results and get conclusions, we can get to a point where we both understand what the real core argument is. And in doing so, challenge ourselves, because the other party should have definitely made some points that would have you reconsider your own views. So people leave that environment with a little bit more respect for each other. And
that's what we need today. We need more respect for the other side's opinion.
Yes.
You don't have to agree with the other side, but you definitely have to respect where they're coming from and see where they're coming from. Put ourselves in other people's shoes. I love that you're thinking in those terms.
We have to do that. So Dream Week also allows individuals the ability to venture. So you can venture spiritually, you can venture intellectually, you can venture literally physically. We have kids on the east side now who do not need an excuse to be at, say, the matinee. Well, they have an excuse, but they shouldn't have an excuse. And they realize that it's a place that is welcoming, and they can also contribute to what the matinee is, and it could be the tobing, it could be the carver, it could be the Guadalupe. So they all become these destinations for people who haven't been to those locations, because I think it's very important for us to understand as a community that San Antonio belongs to every one of us, and or we are equal shareholders in this idea and this the city San Antonio. So every single one should have access to every place that is public, and it's very important.
That's wonderful. So can you, I love hearing the history and the background of Dream Week. Can you tell us what is your thing this year for Dream Week?
Right. So, our theme is our future, Tiffany. So our future. And we thought a lot about that. And the reason we came up with that thing was that, we believe that the future is what we are doing now. You and I are kind of creating our future as we speak, literally, right? And it's important not to, as dreamers, we have to believe that what we're doing now impacts this final vision that we have. And that the vision might be revised when we get to our destination each time to, a truer and a more probably even pure goal. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, we might not arrive at that final destination because it might just be the actual, journey that is what's more important. And I know you were going to ask me later, I didn't want to bring it in, but, the recent case you're going to introduce later on in the show.
We can talk about it now.
Amplifies that fact that the things that you are maybe doing in your lifetime, you may not see the actual, and that's essentially what MLK is, part of MLK's message as well, that you can work towards this goal that you may not necessarily arrive at, but you'll be sure and certain that it would happen.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. To my listeners, you're listening to On the Record with Tiffany, and come back because in our next segment, we're going to talk with Sho about Plessy v. Ferguson and what that means today. So let's remember, we're all more alike than we are different. So let's open our ears and our hearts and listen to what's going on the other side. Sometimes what we think is tough isn't quite as tough as we have made it in our own minds. So let's open our minds and hearts and listen a little bit more. And you've been listening to On the Record with Tiffany. And we're back with another segment of On the Record with Tiffany, and with the visionary and founder of Dream Week, Sho. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
And I want to dive right into Plessy v. Ferguson. We just saw a big, for those of you who don't know what Plessy v. Ferguson is, because it did happen a long time ago. It is a landmark case from 1896 in which the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of racial segregation under the separate but equal doctrine.
Okay.
That case stemmed from an incident in 1892 in which an African-American train passenger, Homer Plessy, refused to sit in a car for Black people. Rejecting Plessy's argument that his constitutional rights were violated, the Supreme Court ruled that a law that implies merely a legal distinction between white people and Black people was not unconstitutional. So this past week, we saw that get overturned. And what we saw that was so beautiful about it, I mean, it had been overturned before, but what we saw this week was the family members of Plessy and Ferguson came together and said, hey, this should have never happened. We're better than this as a people and as a nation. And we want to acknowledge that we're better than this. And the great state of Louisiana actually acknowledged it and made a big gesture towards all communities that we needed to right a wrong. So I think that kind of leads into what you are doing with Dream Week and with your idea and vision for that.
Yes, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful location. And, and they must have worked together, both families, or at least just members of the family would have worked together for years as well. We're just recognizing that, right? And that's part of the genius within the community that we kind of miss sometimes when we miss this, opportunity to recognize that there are people out there who are peacemakers, right? They are peacemakers first. And being a peacemaker in that situation, you would have had to leave home, leave some of the people that you care behind to go across, to the other side, or at least in a sort of a median. And so both of them had, distractors on both sides.
Exactly.
It's not as if one, they drag either side. And hopefully that union and the celebration of that union is going to allow the others who are a little bit resistant to join into this, very important, I think, collaboration. We had a speaker for Dream Week called Daryl Davis. Mm-hmm. Daryl Davis is he's a musician, but in his spare time, he goes out to reach out to KKK members and, talk to them and sometimes even actually break bread with them. And he's responsible for actually decimating the Klan in Maryland, accordingly.
Wow.
From this approach. So there are about 15 to, it's probably a lot more now. He was here about 4 years ago, so probably a lot more now. But he also had a great deal of resistance and critics on the side, on the African-American side, because they felt that one shouldn't go out and, dine with the devil. And there should be no considerations at all. These are people that we shouldn't have to beg to be more humane or more human. And so that's a discussion that would have. So with, Percy versus Ferguson, you still have the same, where we're celebrating, but we're also celebrating a kind of a neutrality. It's not as if we've done more. This is basically, should be the actual standard. It should be the default setting.
Right.
We're celebrating here. And so that tells you how much further we need to go. But it's so important to always say, look, you know what? That is how goodness and being true, that is what it looks like when we're being honest and true, and we're being each other's neighbor, true neighbor.
And I love that, because, if often people will equate, they bring in their values and say, hey, this is my personal ethos. My personal ethos is I'm a Christian. So I'll take myself and I'll say my personal ethos, Tiffany's personal ethos is that I'm a Christian. So if as a Christian, I'm approaching a subject like racism, then I have to approach that subject with some degree of forgiveness for the other side. And that is a hard thing to say and to live, because there are moments when someone is saying something or doing something that is so egregious that you're just like, this is an unforgivable thing. And
Tiffany,
I don't want to, my flesh doesn't want to forgive this action, XYZ action. But in order to overcome any adversity, one has to, at some point, extend the olive branch. We have to. That is how you avoid yourself being consumed with the pain of hatred and anger, because that can go on both sides. On any subject, that can go on both sides. And I like the fact that we saw the extension of the olive branch while maintaining the dignity of those who've been wronged. Like you can, that can happen. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
One has to believe strongly in their own success to be able to forgive, that it doesn't disrupt your success in what or your mission in what you're doing. And it's so important to see that as not you're not backsliding, or you're not doing anything that is going to affect what your future is going to be by forgiving. Forgiving doesn't necessarily mean joining hands or so. It's basically saying that this is not going to affect the outcome that I truly believe would happen.
Yeah.
By doing this gesture, it's not going to affect the outcome. And Tiffany, I say this quite frequently. I think that is, you just touched on one aspect of the genius in African Americans, and it's their ability to forgive. African Americans, the ability to forgive and show that through all of this, there is and continues to be this path to greatness, because it's not relevant to it's not going to be relevant to who we are ultimately. All the things that have happened, we shall overcome. And that's very important.
Can you tell us about your speaker series and who and the topics that are coming our way next week and the next 2 weeks for Dream Week?
So you're going to get me in trouble here, but there are 32 individual speakers in the Dream Hour speaker series. It's called the Dream Hour speaker series. The entire program for each speaker is going to be 1 hour, 35 minutes to present, 15 minutes for Q&A, and you get to meet them at the end. We expect very small groups. There's going to be social distancing as well. We've divided it up into 4 locations actually: the Radius Building, the Tobing, Casa San Antonio, who have been very generous, and also the Whitty Museum. So that's, again, we're talking about the idea to venture any of the spaces that individuals haven't been to. We've lined up, I think it's 6 or 7 speakers a day on the hour to go there to present and speak. And all of them have been told, just tell us what you think our future should be. And that's basically it. And we expect that, to be able to discuss what our future is, you have to include me in it. And you have to also respect the position that I want to be in that future as well. Or this position I aspire to being in that. So rather than have people talk about the future, I think it's important to talk about our future. For the panel series, we've divided it up into, different groups. There's going to be a panel that will discuss the future of health, the future of art, the future of technology, future of justice, and I think we have about 8 of them that would, and that discussion is really just talking in broad terms about what we see in the future. And we don't expect people to be prophets here, or
right.
That's not the idea. Is that what the underlying question is, what should we be doing now to live more peacefully in the future? That's really the underlying idea. And so let's take, for example, health issue with cancer. And is obviously you have, the challenge of the health care system and also the researchers to come up with a cure or an effective one. But there's a huge debate underlying that between, whether it's the different therapy styles and the different medication, and there's a huge fight underneath that, right? We never get that far because we're talking about this, smoking does this or that does that, but we don't talk about this other side of it as to the fact that there might be some forces that are probably resistant to a cure because they have vast amounts of income to lose. And that is become a sort of industry. So on one side, you have all these breakthrough therapies and wonderful things happening. And then the other side is this resistance to having a final cure because it's now such a huge thing, right? We have on the other side, we have a debate going on within the Black community as to those who are specifically will benefit from, the reparation if it ever does arrive, and the fact that the foundational African Americans should be distinct from the Black immigrants like me, for example. There should be some sort of distinction, and that also that a lot of what we celebrate as progress, whether it's with President Obama or with Vice President Kamala, you have they're considered, born from immigrants and not directly from the African American, family, as it were. So that is a discussion that we need to.
So many huge discussions that are,
yes.
I mean, so many things that are intrinsic to what's happening in the country that we never even scratched the surface of, that you are attempting to really reach into and look at. Just
quickly, what the point really is that I might be considered an LGBTQ ally, for example, but I don't know enough about the community. I really don't know enough. And what it means is that I basically have a firm understanding of my own sexuality, for example. And why would I deny anyone the same belief in their own sexuality as well? Why would I deny that? I would never experience what they're experiencing, but no one had to educate me or teach me as to what it was that naturally I gravitated towards. So we have to have that discussion. It's pointless just necessarily just pointing at words or law or labels. It's important to understand that each individual is literally custom made, and we can deep dive into the LGBTQ community and go into a sub community within it and another sub, and you find conflict in every fashion. So the method to resolve these conflicts is not something that should just be a top line. I try to discourage people who have an agenda and they come to Dream Week and it's really just to bash on the other side, or to say, hey, look, we are victims, because there's so much information surrounding that out there. Dream Week is about saying, okay, I'm ready to make a deal here. I'm ready to discuss. I'm ready to even learn more, and I'm open to changing my position because I think it's better for all of us.
And I love that about Dream Week, because victimization, anytime you walk into a situation as a victim, then your power has just been given away. But when you walk into a situation empowered with the knowledge of both sides, then you have the ability to make decisions. Yes. and to affect change for both. Empowerment is taking control of a situation, seeing what your role is in it and what the other's role is in whatever the problem or path is that you're on. Because anytime we take a role as a victim and say, oh, they control me, well, then they have the power. The illustrious they, I mean, they just do all kinds of stuff that, according to the rest of the world. But when you walk in and you know who you are, you know what you stand for, and you're willing to sit down and lay out, okay, this is who show is, this is what I stand for. I want to hear what your perspective is on this matter, and let's see if we can come to a consensus. Now you're affecting change.
Yeah, the victimizer also might have been a victim, themselves, and
And often that's the case. That's what our statistics tell us. And that's what social science tells us. That's what psychology tells us. It's often victims, victimizers were victims at one time.
Yes, but what will, without dismissing the fact that they are, victims, and there's some right now who are going through this challenge of actually breaking away from that whatever pain and in some cases torture they're going through. But sometimes it's not as easy as just stepping away and moving on. There's a lot to deal with. Yet they are more than that.
Right.
And that is what I think we have to bring back is, what are we missing out in this individual by just necessarily looking at them at that through that lens, continuously? What else is there?
That's one sliver of their experience.
Completely.
There's so much more.
So much more. So much more, and we can't keep missing that. So, before I came to San Antonio, my friends, I lived in New York for a while, and my friends were going, "Why would you even think about Texas?" And so the idea.
Wait a minute. Now I love Texas. Where are you going with this show? No.
Well, obviously, I'm here, and the globe is huge, but I'm in Texas, so there must be a reason for it. So, the point is that I came in here, and of course, my entire experience of Texas was through media and all forms of media. And I'm not saying it in a negative fashion, but all forms of media. I had to read about it. I saw little clips. I saw some, movies and the like. But ultimately, that's all you know until you actually visit a place, and then you realize that, or once you realize that these are just labels, they're names. In the end, in San Antonio, they're people, and the more of those people you meet, the more complex you realize that any one environment is. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you try and get to know as many people as possible. It makes a huge difference. We should have there should be no reason, for example, where you can break bread, you can just invite somebody you've just met, with no agenda besides just getting to know them and getting to know their culture, getting to know how they live. And the rewards are immense. And I think that's really what I've been very fortunate to experience in San Antonio. When I first arrived here, people used to ask me then why I was here. And, I've lived in London, I've lived in New York, I've lived in one of Lagos. These are some of the biggest cities out there. But no, there's never been any place that I moved to that asked me that question. And it was very odd to me. And everywhere else I'd been then, I kind of saw kind of a finished, canvas. Most people that I engaged with at that time, especially in New York, were kind of just fueling the entire city, but they were not part of what was going on at all. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, but they were not the vehicles. This is the fuel, and they're not the driver. They didn't even know the destination. And I felt somewhat like that in San Antonio. I felt that I could breathe a little bit more, and it also has this characteristic of being, I think, the only cities that I've heard of or been that has generations of all three major groups here. They, whites, African Americans, and Hispanics, and you have all three groups represented here for generations. Mm-hmm. And so they've kind of figured out a way to at the very least, tolerate each other, right? At the very least, but even so, more than that, I think there's this interesting mixture here. I tell my friends in New York, and you might go to Chinatown or you go to Little Italy and be part of it, but it's kind of it's just a marketplace type of culture. In San Antonio, you have to leave those other cultures as well. It surrounds you a little bit more. It's less of a street level facing. You can drive around the city and get to know it. You have to knock on doors and be welcomed. And so that is what I think makes San Antonio special. And that's one of the reasons I liked it here, because it gives me the I basically have to challenge myself to be able to get out of what my little bubble and meet people in other bigger cities. It's or more established. I don't want you to use that word, but in the much bigger cities, it's a lot more difficult to be as engaging.
That what you said there, I love, because San Antonio it's a large city, but with a small town feel to it. And people here do engage with one another. And because it is a crossroads of America, it's a microcosm of the United States. It is probably one of the most beautiful places to live, aesthetically, and for the soul and the spirit of this thing that we call the American dream. You have been listening to On the Record with Tiffany, and my wonderful visionary guest show, the founder and visionary for Dream Week, Shokare Nikori. And come back, we have one more segment, and we're going to talk about his highlights for Dream Week this year. He's got 32 speakers who are going to talk about what it means to them for our future. What is our future going to be? What do they envision our future as within their various realms and areas of expertise? And I just thank you. Thank you, Sho, for what you're doing in the community. And I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more about Dream Week and how you are living out the vision, how your team, and when I say you, I mean collectively, the Dream Week team, how you all are living out this vision that Martin Luther King Jr. had for us. And once again, you're listening to On the Record with Tiffany. We're more alike than we are different, and we get the pleasure of having hometown heroes and what I envision to be national heroes here on our show. And we have one of them with us today. So thank you, Sho. And come on back for the last segment of On the Record with Tiffany. And we're back with On the Record with Tiffany. You're listening to On the Record with Tiffany here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer, and on the African American Network Television, where we have a local feel with a global reach. And I'm so thankful to have both networks sponsoring us, and to be a part of both of them, because our demographics our demographics really identify what we are here for, which is to bring together all aspects of our society so that we can hear one another, see one another, and realize the humanity in each other. So today I have Shokare Napodia, a leader in our community and a visionary that I have the pleasure of interviewing and seeing from the inside out his organization as a volunteer. I've volunteered with Dream Week, and that's really how I got involved for the first time. So I got to see what they are like and how they run, and just the heart of the organization, which definitely makes them heroes in my book and everyone else's. Anybody that sees what Sho is doing with this and what his team is doing, and I hold you up, Sho, because you're the leader. There is no Dream Week without the visionary behind Dream Week, and then the team that you've assembled for it, in which your team is stellar. But I just want our audience to see Sho and Dream Week and what Dream Week is doing, because in this particular political climate, we just had trials coming together for January 6th, and we've seen a lot of division in our nation. I love to highlight the ways that we can come together. We don't have to be divided. We can have our own opinions, but we can come together and share them. And Sho represents that. So thank you, Sho.
Thank you. Look, Tiffany, I have to thank you again for all the work you've done and the background for Dreamvoice, presented with Dream Week. You know, I remember seeing you come up the stairs, you know, a couple of years ago, or maybe even more, for the very first time.
Like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, for the first time, and I think we might have started a conversation at the end of the orientation, and we probably spoke for about 30 minutes, just like going on. And even then, I said, "Oh, wow, you know, this is a wonderful connection." And you know, I'm just delighted that we've reached people like you who can do so much work, you know, in getting the word out that that collectively that we have something special going on in San Antonio. And I'm fortunate that I am kind of, you know, the herald, and I started it, but you know, it came from having the largest march in the nation, right? I started to ask. I had the good fortune of working on, you know, in my other job, the MightyGroup. I had the good fortune of doing a lot of creative work for the March one year. And I was so in awe of it, because I had to get up super early, 6 o'clock, and probably stay till the very end. The last person left the march. So I saw the entire process, how it developed, and, you know, and kind of how it ended. And you know, I started to ask myself and a few colleagues and wondered how we could maybe extend this outside of just the march. Just like you said, Dream Year should be something that we should have. And it was that same sort of, oh, I need more of this. And how can we get people whose hearts are in the right place, but for some reason or the other, they just can't make the march? You know, how can we give them another opportunity to celebrate this tolerance, diversity, and equality, where we all come together, you know, march in the same direction. And, you know, we disperse as well. But at one point, at some point, we had this, you know, agreement, you know, kind of this collection of a moment when we all sort of agreed to be doing something together. And, you know, it really helped. And so we went out to all the organizations, you know, we started from Summer, and I remember, and obviously the city of San Antonio, huge partners. Without them, there'd be no Dream Week. The huge sponsors, but more importantly, they also try to give us the resources, the contacts to reach out to a broader network. And for the first few years, nobody said no. And that's when we knew we had something special going on, because there was just a thirst for it. And of course, you know, people want to use, we have to be very careful, and because MLK's dream did not have any one group outside of it. And so we had to be very careful that in our approach, in our language, we weren't dismissive of any group at all. And that has been the biggest biggest challenge. And your question about those people reaching across the aisle, or just trying to respect each other, as we discussed in the past, those tasks are a lot more difficult than they appear, because the beer people like Dreamvoice, once we seem to be of one agenda or the other, then we are less likely to be successful. We want to make sure that Dream Week is, for everyone. The only criteria we have is that you cannot have an event that, your events must allow every single person the opportunity to participate or attend. And that's all we say. Once you exclude people,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't believe that that's a path forward for the future, for a peaceful future. Everyone has to be included in that dialogue. And increasingly, we anticipated, again, we're not prophets, but just by being on the ground, ears to the ground, we anticipated the kind of issues we were going to have a couple of years ago with a lot of the protests. And our position, for example, with the idea of police brutality is that we have to be very careful in dismissing a large group of individuals under one banner and say police. They have to be our neighbors. They have to be, parents of children that our children relate with, or even, connect with. We have to see them as human beings first.
We can't treat the police in the same way, but
yes.
If we don't, the same thing that we've experienced as
yes.
African Americans
yes.
is what we're doing to the police. If we lump them all under one set of criteria and say, this is who these folks are, when 99% of your police are not engaging in anything that's wrong against the community. Their hearts are to do the right things
yes.
for the community. That's why they got into the job that they got into. But when you're being characterized by the lowest common denominator within your group, and everybody is saying, this is who you are.
Right.
That's it's hard not to take that personally.
But Tiffany, that's the beauty of all of this in terms of how we would project that in Dream Week, is that the other side demands that individuals should not use the label police to traumatize their own neighbors.
Yes.
Very important as well. They have to know them and interact with them primarily from the human level. Basically, it cannot be a position of power. It cannot be a position of dismissal as a person. They have to engage in, and so it's both. It's not
both sides of being asked.
It's not both sides are wrong, because you can't justify the killing by police of individuals. That should be that should be absolutely just rare for that to happen. And so it demands that both parties look at each other and decide what it is. Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I demand, and just demand that they're treated as human. And so there's kind of successes in the sense that we can say, well, okay, fine. There's been we recognize now that there's some elements within the police force that shouldn't really be there. They can't learn anything from that environment. In fact, it makes them worse than they are as human beings. They shouldn't be there. But we should also recognize, and it's very, very important, that if we do not have police and community or police living within the community and interacting and having this relationship on a very, very basic foundational level with the community, not as policemen, but as individuals, then things are not going to get better. It really demands that we start to talk about individuals. It's very important.
That's one of the beautiful things about Dream Week, is that you're thinking in terms of solving a problem. And the only way to get to a resolution for any problem is to see all of the angles. We said earlier that people are custom made, that this is custom made. And something that on my another hat that I wear is in healthcare. Something that we're finding more and more in the medical field is that precision medicine is really where it's at. Each person, each individual, and the cells that make up every individual human being, they're a little bit different. And so how you would treat that individual simply because of their lifestyle as well as their molecular makeup is very precise. So when we talk about human beings and in a more social realm, that is still the same. That's still the same. Every single human being is different. And so what is the purpose that I'm walking through life with, and the purpose that you are walking through life with, and every other human is different. So I can't occupy your purpose. You can't occupy mine. I can't take a single thing away from you, and you can't take a single thing away from me. But together we can be phenomenal. Together we can be phenomenal if we understand each other and what that individual brings to the table. So
there has to be that expectation that each individual has something to contribute. Right? There has to be that expectation. Once you dismiss somebody's value in the community, is dismissed, they're not, then we have real challenges, because now we have someone who's probably going to work against the system if the system itself was just in the first place. But you don't need even more people against it. You need to work within it and fix it, like you rightly mentioned. But if there's anything that I would hope, say, that's Dream Week can, bridge or move the needle, I would say it's the fact that people started to recognize individuals that were exceptional from every background, not just the stories of people who necessarily rags to riches, didn't have, now have. You have to talk about people who have and have also given. Talk about people who don't have and still don't have and are quite content. There are people like that. There are people who have a lot and want more. Okay, that's the drive. As long as none of this is illegal, that's how the entire community fabric is. Once we start to spend a lot more time dismissing or criticizing somebody else's stance, we're not doing enough to present ours. And that is what MLK's genius was, or at least a lot of the members of the civil rights movement. What is your case? What are you saying? Convince me, convince us. But we underline all of that, we have to believe that the truest voice, we have to believe that would always triumph. I mean, could you hear truth and be dismissive of it? I don't know if that's possible. We also understand that there are people who are very persuasive, Second World War is, a resultant of that, and can sway a lot of people to do, commit these atrocious crimes and do evil to others, right? So the people that we should celebrate should be the peacemakers, people who are bringing together into a space people who would not naturally not even occupy that space, let alone be willing to talk. That's what we're trying to do with Dream Week. And there are more of those people like you. There are more of those people than people who choose to divide. We just don't do enough to expose them.
Well, I thank you for everything you're doing with Dream Week, and tell our listeners when Dream Week is, when those 2 weeks are, and where they should go to check out the events for Dream Week.
Okay, we have about 50,000 brochures and booklets flying around, well, not flying around at certain locations all over the city, but all the events are posted at dreamweek.org, dreamweek.org, dreamweek.org. All the events are posted there. Dream Week starts on the 13th. We have a press conference and then a breakfast in the morning. And it goes on for 2 weeks, all the way to the 30th. Some of the events, obviously, because of the situation we find ourselves, are being postponed and might take place a little bit later. But we started off with 213 events last week. A few have canceled, but we have close to 200 events still on the schedule. And some of them are virtual, some of them are from contributors outside of San Antonio. We've engaged all our sister cities, and they're going to be part of this. And we have 32 speaker series, individuals participating in our speaker series. We also have a panel of 4 individuals each, and there are 8 of those. So right off the top of my head, I think we have 64 individuals who are going to be speaking, and they're from all walks of life. And, finally, we have the Mayor's Ball, which is a celebration of our elected officials here at the very close out of Dream Week. And it's we use that opportunity to showcase talent within the city that probably haven't had as much exposure as they should. And it's always a wonderful celebration. We're exhausted by then, but we pick ourselves and clean up and dust ourselves and get out there. And, we might even be caught dancing at the very end.
Well, I just want to thank you for what you're doing in the community, and to my listeners, make sure that you go and check out dreamweek.org. He just said there are over 200 events, and I want you to know there are events in the arts. There are events that, yes, there's the speakers series where they're going to be answering the question, what do you envision for our future? And with 32 different speakers, you're going to get a lot of diverse answers, and that in and of itself will be interesting for anybody that has an interest in.
And Tiffany, trust me, it really, really helps. That is how I grow. So Dream Week is this late Christmas gift for me every year. Listening to 32 individuals with completely different opinions.
Well, and Dream Week for me, I'll tell you what it means for me too, is it is the way that I like to start off my year. I don't do New Year's resolutions because I don't believe in making up some resolution. How I'm going to direct my year is not a hope, wish, or prayer. How I'm going to direct my year is purpose driven. So, and Dream Week helps me. Oftentimes, the very prayers of my heart and direction for my future, Dream Week gives me a lot of confirmation to that. As I listen to the various speakers, I get a lot of confirmation for the path that God has me on in this life. So I encourage our listeners, who I know many of whom are walking down the same path that I'm walking down. This is a place where not only have I experienced change, but I've actually experienced the very voice of my creator speaking to me through the people that are on these panels and that I'm listening to. So I encourage you to go look at it, pray through it, and go and pick an event and learn something new about what's happening in the world around us. And
or at the very least, if you can't this year, would love you to share your voice in 2023. It's open to you. It's open to your own presentation. If you have something that you honestly believe will benefit the community, please, please, please don't hesitate. Right after Dream Week, reach out to us and we can put you on the calendar for the following year.
And you heard that. So think about what you can contribute. Think about what your voice is. If you don't hear your voice there, then it's time for you to get your voice out there. If you don't hear your opinion represented, put your opinion out there. Stand up. This is the time to stand up and showcase who we are and what we think.
Your opinion might be the actual voice that we all been waiting for.
That's right. So you've been listening to On the Record with Tiffany. Thank you so much, Sho, for coming out and listening and telling us all about Dreamvoice and Dream Week.
Yes.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate everything that you're doing in our community. And I'm looking forward to this. I cannot wait. I do it every year, and I encourage our listeners who want to volunteer, go to that same website, dreamweek.org, and offer your services to volunteer. They still need people for the Spurs games, and I know y'all love the Spurs. So we still need volunteers for that. There, like Joe said, there are over 200 events, and we need volunteers for them. So go to dreamweek.org and just check it out. See what's there. You're gonna be on there for an hour. I can tell you that. So set aside an hour of your time. But you've been listening to On the Record with Tiffany. Thank you, Sho, and thank you to our sponsors, 9:30 a.m. The Answer, and the African American Network Television, where we have a local feel and a global reach. Remember, we are more alike than we are different. And once again, I just want you to think through, what can you do to contribute to change and progress in our nation?